So in that work, through that work and through the work since then, because this was about 4 or 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, there were several insights that came out through that process. Mostly because we met 200 or 300 of the world's greatest innovators. It really was a kind of life-changing experience. And so I'm just going to go quickly through some of those. The first came from E.O. Wilson, greatest life scientist perhaps working today. We went into the jungle in Panama with him, and he said, if you just took the American way of life and rolled it out to the whole world, you would need 4 additional planet Earths. And at first you think, well, that's the worst news we've heard this afternoon. But in fact, it's the best because it takes that off the table. We're not going to do that. We're going to do it in a new way. One of the people that we met was a man named Ray Kurzweil. And the interesting thing about Kurzweil was that he was able to show us that innovation is not accidental, even though it is discovery. So even though we're discovering things and inventing things, they're happening at an alarmingly consistent pace. So we can know exactly how long it's going to take to get somewhere, to get to new capacity. So he showed us that we're roughly doubling our capacity every 12 months, which means that you, in the next 20 years, will live through a 1,000,000-fold increase in the capacity to move information. So the tool that you have on your, in your hand or on your lap will be a 1,000,000-fold increased in power in only 20 years. And so he charted this out, and this shows how soon we will get, what we can get for $1,000 on our desktop. And it shows that we're coming on now to about somewhere between 1 insect and 1 mouse brain. So you can get for $1,000 the processing power of a mouse. By somewhere around 2040, we have the capacity of all human brains for $1,000. So imagine when you walk into a room and you have a human brain in your pocket as well as the one on your shoulders. And the capacity that you have to change things. That's what you have to work for. You have to work towards that new possibility. What that means is that there's no longer back of house. The idea that somehow we're going to have kind of front of house activity and back of house is really a thing of the past. That, as I said, design is no longer visual. So when you have that kind of capacity to move information, the primary function of design is no longer a visible object. That the ultimate goal of design is to get to sustainability, to get to forever. How do we do these wonderful things that we love to do, but do them in a way that we can do them in perpetuity, that we can do them forever? I worked with Coca-Cola on a sustainability platform for Coca-Cola. And we presented it at a conference in New York, and a young guy came up to the microphone and said, look, if you want to be sustainable, why don't you just not produce it? Like, why don't you just quit making Coke? That would probably be the most sustainable. And my partner from the company had to answer in a kind of corporate answer, which I couldn't really understand. But I said, look, I don't have to answer that way, because I actually don't want a future without Coca-Cola. I love having a Coke. I shouldn't have too many of them. But I want to do it in a way that's not stealing from my kids or leaving them a toxic legacy. I want to do it in a way that I can do it forever, and they can do it too. That's just design. It's just a design problem. We just have to change the way we do it. And that's what we have to get to. And so this is the final insight, is that design is actually the way by which we make those smart things the right thing, that people understand that's so much more beautiful than the old way. And that's where beauty comes back in, that ultimately we want to make the smart things the most compelling, the most beautiful. You know, when we showed all those sustainable vehicles in Massive Change, we had invisible alarms, sensors on them, and the alarms rang for 3.5 months. Because people wanted those things. They wanted to get in them. They wanted to have them. Because they're the smart new thing and they're beautiful. If they're ugly and clunky, they don't want them. They don't want to go backwards. They don't want to define their future negatively. That's where design is really coming back into the foreground. So I think I might stop for a little bit and answer questions. And then I've got a few other things that I could show you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for what you've shared so far. Thank you, Bruce. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, or maybe just points, things that Bruce has made us think about. I think we might be live streaming, so it might be quite important to rush around with a mic, but no, we're all right with that. Fine, okay. So
I can also repeat the question.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Okay.
When you speak about designing, the objective of design is perpetuity, and you cite to Coca-Cola, you can enjoy it, and your children can enjoy it, and you're not leaving behind a toxic mess. You seem to be indicating that a successful design for perpetuity will have no negative impact, or do you allow for some margin of negative impact?
Well, I'm optimistic that we can actually ultimately design the negative impacts out. That even the negative impacts can be redesigned to be positive. That it's just pushing design to a much, much higher level of complexity. Like, if you think about the way that design has been operating in the past, it was very one-to-one. So, you know, people in design and in business talked about, and in government and in organizations, talked about reducing the brief as much as possible. Getting the brief to the designer down as concise as possible. And we're actually trying to go the other way. We're trying to say, let's push the brief up to be as holistic as possible and understand the implications.